Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the OTT.X Wednesday Webinar series, where we bring you thought-provoking presentations from thought leaders from across our ever-changing OTT industry. My name is Jose Rodriguez, and on behalf of the entire OTT.X team, thank you for joining us today. Today, we have a very exciting conversation about the complex realm of OTT data and the most valuable ways to measure, guide, and optimize content investment and distribution decisions. We will learn how the Weather Channel is leveraging collection and analysis to successfully track revenue performance and gain content insights despite the low visibility conditions of today's data ecosystem. We're delighted to be joined by Paul Hutton, Senior Director of Digital Intelligence for the Allen Media Group, and Mark Moeder, CEO of SymphonyAI Media, to discuss their experience and talk about shared data challenges and successful strategies to overcome them. Mark, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Jose. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and thanks for all the attendees probably taking time out of their very busy schedules just to learn a little bit more of what I've often said is one of the most foundationally critical elements of the media and entertainment space, and that is understanding the data and sometimes the challenges therein just in acquiring it. So for just a general agenda, the approach I thought we would take is just a couple minutes introduction as to who SymphonyAI is, just to kind of ground the audience as to kind of the role my company plays in the ecosystem. And then the same from Paul, just to give a quick overview of who Local Now is, Allen Media, all of its various properties, just to really ground the conversation. From there, he and I will just delve into kind of an open dialogue and conversation around some of the challenges around data acquisition, data insights, results, KPIs, et cetera, some solutions that are available to really take those data insights and turn them into actionable results. And then also a bit more future looking, understanding what's possible in the space, what the industry can and should be doing to really make better business decisions and informed business decisions. So with that said, we can go ahead and just jump in as to who SymphonyAI is. At our heart, we are a big data AI company who are very vertically focused. So we have more than 1,300 customers worldwide, and we really specialize in a couple of key verticals. So we'll obviously come back to media, but as an example, the retail CPG space, we work with some of the largest retailers in the world, as well as the brands for consumer packaged goods. And we help with things like supply chain management, which, as you can imagine, during COVID got very complex, but also kind of more in real time product placements, understanding halo effects of what product next to what product influences consumer behavior, understanding shelf placement, understanding forecasting, both based on weather and consumer behavior and all these other things to really help these retailers understand how to optimize their consumer experience, as well as their overall revenue and halo effects and buy-on patterns. On the finance realm in the fintech, we work with some of the largest banks in the world. So, in some cases, we're doing real-time transaction analysis, looking for fraud. So we're in real time, our AI engine's understanding every transaction, looking for things that are kind of out of the ordinary, and then flagging them to what amounts to kind of an army of investigators whose job it is to kind of sleuth out and sniff out any nefarious intent or bad actors in the ecosystem. And then our platform also helps those investigators to really backtrace kind of sources of funds, looking for malfeasance or any nefarious intent, obviously, in the ecosystem. In doing so, it protects the banks, protects the infrastructure, and protects the ultimate consumer as well. And obviously several other verticals. But what we're here to talk about today is the media realm, right? So the organization's been around for nearly 40 years. And so we started out life as kind of a revenue optimization, revenue leakage consultancy. And we would be between the content owner and the distributor. In some cases, that could be an MVPD, could be a VMPD, could be a platform, really understanding, measuring the agreement, the commercial agreements between the entities, understanding the revenue that's downstream, and really being that objective layer of truth saying, this is what should have been paid versus was paid, ways to optimize that, ways to improve both the platform and the distributor, as well as the content owner's relative position in the marketplace. And since then, we've evolved to become our own SaaS AI platform. So we're currently managing, several $1 billion dollars worth of our customers' revenue, taking disparate data from the platforms, whether it's traditional linear for subscriber counts, viewership, rates, platforms, tiers, etc., bringing that into the application, and also on the digital side, where the data complexity is a magnitude more complicated, and really bringing those in. We've really done well, worked and earned our position in the marketplace with over 90% of the leading global media and entertainment companies as our partners in one way, shape, or form, in a multitude of different functions. Which really takes us to our Rivetia platform, which I think is really part and parcel to what we're talking about today. So Rivetia started out on the traditional linear side, really working with MVPDs, bringing in all their subscriber data, revenue details, comparing that again to the distribution agreement and the KPIs therein, making sure that on an ongoing basis that the parties are working in concert, and everything from revenue management, forecasting, revenue treatment, accruals, adjustments, posting, all of those things. As all of you are fully aware, as the rise of OTT and digital continues to accelerate, that created an opportunity to evolve our Rivetia platform to support a myriad of different business models. Everything from the various VODs to fast channels, all of those have a plethora of data that is incredibly challenging to manage. We will bring in data from dozens of different distribution outlets. And the very first thing we have to do is normalize that data, right? What it's called a single piece of content or a single stream of data to one distributor, when it comes back, can look very different than a different distributor. So we normalize all of that information, which in and of itself is a huge boon, because now you've got a single system of truth to understand the totality of your distribution and the performance results therein. From there, then we can get into optimization, predicting, forecasting, as well as all the revenue treatments, and really helping you understand what is happening to help inform what could and should be happening in the future. So we'll talk more about this during the webinar, but really thought it would be helpful to kind of ground the conversation as to kind of who SAI is in the marketplace. And with that, I'll hand over the voiceover to Paul to kind of give a quick overview of Allen Media and all of its various initiatives. Paul, please.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, everybody. The Allen Media Group is actually comprised of several various different businesses, ranging from broadcast affiliate networks like your ABC, CBS's, to production of live syndication shows. The area that my team focuses on is actually the digital group, which is comprised of some of these platforms you see before you, such as Pattern, which is our climate change platform, where our mission is to explore, inform, engage, and revel in the patterns of our planet. The Griot, where our motto is Black Culture Amplified, is the only 100% Black-owned and targeted omni-channel, where they're committed to providing authentic lifestyle, entertainment, and new content to uplift and enhance the lives of our audience. The Griot is also available across all platforms, ranging from linear to OTA to streaming, and of course on the web. Also, HBCU Go, which is one of our more recently launched boutique brands, which is a cultural lifestyle destination where we amplify the voice of Black excellence while sharing the rich history and diversity of the HBCU experience. We provide actually 52 weeks of Black college sports, covering several conferences such as the SWAC, the MEAC, and the CIAA, just to name a few. Our next slide. The key brands are actually still the Weather Channel TV app, which is still America's most trusted media organization. And it provides our audience with 24/7 live coverage, which is also available in Spanish language. The app allows the audience to personalize their weather forecast, which includes live radar, maps, and satellite views. And during severe weather, such as the recent Hurricane Idalia, we provide multiple alternative feeds from various locations where we either have OCMs live in the field or live cameras so that you can actually experience the storm in real time. Next slide. And last but not least is Local Now. Local Now is actually one of the fastest growing free streaming apps in the OTT space with the most free channels available anywhere. Next slide. We have over 500 channels live that you can watch in your particular market. And actually, we were also the first streaming platform to actually launch the PBS channels in over 300 plus markets. Also, if you haven't heard, in the last few weeks, we've actually have launched CBS and NBC on our networks, and we have several other major new launches coming into the very near future. And also, we also provide what we call our Local Now, which is our MyStream, which in every SGA in America, we provide local news coverage, sports, weather, and community updates. So you can actually know exactly what's happening in your market. As well as we also have a family-friendly network. So we actually stay away from violent content and actually also limit our exposure to our political coverage, just to keep it. Next slide. On top of that, we also have over 20,000 different movie and VOD titles on our network. So as you can see, from a full news and entertainment experience, Local Now pretty much meets everything that our audience is looking for. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and we could just have a conversation now, Paul. But thanks, congratulations on your success, and also, frankly, a thank you. I mean, all of your various platforms and initiatives all serve a great consumer benefit and have high value. So, congratulations on the NBC and CBS. That's all very valuable content to keep the consumer and the ultimate public informed and entertained. So congratulations on that success. So as we really kind of, jump into the topic of data, I guess the first place to start is how, you're in charge of all digital and data intelligence for the totality of Allen Media Group. I guess from your perspective, how important is data to both inform what's happening and how important is it to inform future decision making? Let's start with just the relative importance there of data.
Data actually here has always been one of the key pillars that Allen Media Group has built itself on, where we continually focus on making data-driven decisions. And that's not only in our group, that's across all the various departments, from product, editorial, marketing. So data is very much a key piece to our whole strategy.
So given the myriad of consumers of that, I mean, you listed off like 4 or 5 different departments who all probably have their own kind of optics and bent on what the data they want and how they want to see it. How large is your team just to try to manage and serve the answers to those questions from around the organization? So
my team, we have about 8 different members on my teams, either supporting the various different products or certain business initiatives. But we also work very closely with some of the other data-driven groups, such as our kind of ad tech and ad ops team, which kind of all together kind of totally encompasses what we kind of view as our data science department and groups.
Got it. That makes sense. So I've been pretty vocal in the market for the last 12 to 18 months, just around data transparency. But, data does exist today. But I guess, from your perspective, trying to operate your business, what are some of the largest challenges that really created challenges for your organization to understand the data, make decisions on the data, and so forth?
I would say really probably one of the biggest challenges we've been facing has really been in the FAST space. The FAST space has really taken off over the last few years with various different major large players such as your Roku, Amazon, to smaller players such as your Zumo and CTVs. And they all view and collect and report their data very differently. So whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, trying to combine all of that information and tell one cohesive story and then normalize that data is probably one of the biggest challenges we face, especially coming from a linear background where everyone went to your Nielsen or your ComScore shops. You had a one-stop shop for all. Here, it's not the same and fast. You basically have to go to each individual platform and collect the data from them, and then really understand really their methodology for how they actually calculate their data, which is probably more important than just getting access to the data.
Right, right. And so those challenges are obviously very real and felt by the vast majority of the entire industry. What business problems did that create, trying to sort through those challenges?
It creates a lot. So you'd be shocked, but so one thing here at Local Now, right? We actually, as we mentioned, we have entertainment channels as well as movies. So, and with data being a background, we spent a lot of time and effort really kind of creating reports to provide our audience with regular reporting on the performance of their data from both revenue and an audience perspective. But with some of the especially more recently launched streaming platforms, some of them are still providing Excel files, sometimes not even on a regular basis. Sometimes they have an interface, but the data there may only be available once a month, or it's weekly, but it may be delayed for 3 or 4 weeks before it's available. So when it really comes at the end of a month and you're really working with your senior management team or even your finance department, and they really trying to get a true picture of how they're performing on the various different FAST platforms, which ones are working for them, which ones are not, and also looking for insights into how do we improve that experience. A lot of times the data is extremely limited. Sometimes it's just very top line. It's very rare that you actually get even very detailed, very granular data. So it really kind of makes that whole process very challenging.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we'll probably double click on this later in the conversation, but have you seen, to your point around limited data availability, what I'll call data transparency, obviously you're a quite large organization with a huge footprint. Can you help me understand those various distribution platforms, how they're responding to requests for more information, more data, more granular information? I have that in my office too. So if you guys see me wave my hands, it's trying to turn my light back on. Is there a willingness to engage in that dialogue to increase the data itself and therefore allow you to create better business decisions and better models?
Yeah, I think all the companies have an interest in being able to provide better data to their partners. I think they're required to, especially even from a contractual standpoint, but the maturity varies. It varies from various different companies. And that is probably some of the biggest challenges. Some have really built some very rich consoles where you can actually go in and pull everything that you need. They have a dictionary so you can actually understand how they're defining a unique audience or an MAU, or even how they count an impression for that case. But I would say probably less than half probably really have a truly rich database or information that they can provide on a regular basis. So that's, and plus, I think also an issue with the normalization, how they define, especially how they count minutes and sessions, is, for what I've seen, is almost unique for every single platform.
Yeah, we've seen that as well, working with Allen Media and various other accounts. And from my perspective, the problem is even larger because, just making things up, I'll use the Big Bang Theory because I'm an avid fan of that show. Sending that out to multiple platforms, just the title alone comes back in a disparate way. So it could be Big Bang, could be Big Bang Theory, could be The Big Bang Theory. So you have to normalize just at a very kind of pedantic level initially before you can even get into the business implications. We've absolutely seen that challenge as well. So, I guess just for the benefit of the audience, so Allen Media has recently deployed the Riveting platform. I guess, Paul, from your perspective, what business problem were you solving, to really go to an external solution and partner with like a SymphonyAI?
Yeah. So for us, our real big challenge is we were launching basically OTT streaming versions of several of our linear platforms. So our senior management is very used to be able to get data on a regular basis, if not daily, yet within every few days, to really be able to track, understand, and analyze their business. But in OTT, as we were really expanding into the fast space, that access to the data became was really disparate. And we had a lot of issues, especially with our senior managers basically looking to us, say, we need this data faster, we need to be normalized, we need you to be able to tell us a story of of interpreting this data. And when you're spending time basically cobbling data, downloading from a console, some companies sending you an Excel file, some sending you some audience data, some sending you visitors. It's all over the place. It made it almost close to near impossible to really tell a true accurate story in a acceptable time frame. Like providing that reporting 2-3 months late does not really help the business really understand what's happening. And that really makes a big difference, especially as you get towards the end of the year and you're starting to strat plan for the next year or the next quarter, and you don't really have the information to even understand the shift and the changes they made if they're working. So it really slows down kind of that growth and the development and the biz dev development, because the information they have is just too limited to really make strategic decisions with.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so one thing that I'm actually most excited about, kind of just from an industry perspective, is the flexibility and or agility, kind of interchangeable words there, relative to how you could operate your business, right? You know, in the traditional linear realm, you know, you can change the programming order, but, you know, your distribution is an entirely overcomplicated, you know, process, breaking into a new MVPD, you understand all those complexities. I'm sure the audience does as well. But on the digital side, now you can, you know, you could light up a new partner within weeks, not years. You could change your programming. You can license, you know, by asset instead of by full programming stream, if that serves your business most. Have you seen kind of a larger propensity to take more of those risks and actually just kind of, you know, act and then measure? So to your point.
I definitely see where it's evolving. So if you think of the linear, they used to get their data a few days later to really understand the performance. And one of the things we've been able to do is as we've started to stream, for example, our Weather Channel app on the OTT platforms, we now have kind of real-time data. So during severe weather and storms, we're able to provide our programming content editorial team with actionable insights in a matter of within an hour. How did it perform? You just pushed out a new alternative feed. Are people gravitating to it? We're seeing an increase. The new report just came out that the coming hurricane is now a Cat 4. What type of impact does that have on trialing? So we can see that information in real time, especially with what the audience is watching. So that actually has empowered some of those linear teams in a way that they haven't been empowered before. And I think that is really one of the real powers of streaming, is it's not just to make decisions that drive what you're doing in the streaming universe, but they can also leverage that real-time insight to make decisions about what's actually happening on their live linear channel, which is really new for that space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really kind of one of the heart of my excitements there, because my perspective is it extends beyond the big events, right? Obviously, hurricanes are huge events. There's lots of people that need to be kept informed, and lots of people that are just interested, friends, loved ones, etc. But, you know, you hit on something there that I've been really eager for, and that is to take the real-time data that's coming from a digital side to help inform even newsrooms, right? You know, what types of stories are resonating with the audience? What do they want to learn more about? What don't they necessarily care about? You know, I'll make the joke of the cat in the tree. You know, it might be a feel-good story, but is that something your audience really wants to see? So it's interesting, you know, kind of your perspective on taking that real-time consumer behavior and extrapolating that out to the linear audience. Do you see more of that happening over time to extend into larger organizations?
Oh, I definitely do. I think we definitely use it a lot during more severe adverse weather at this point, but I see where there's applications for it with the live newsrooms where you're talking about certain stories and you can see if you're touching certain topics, that real minute-to-minute data, did I hit a certain topic, and did I start losing audiences? Did I go to an ad, and what was during the ad break, did we start to lose audience after X number of minutes? So it helps inform them, is an ad break particularly too long, and during what day part period? It's extremely granular, but when you can really dive in and start to understand your business to such a microscopic level, it really becomes a game changer in just how they think about their business, how they think about what they can actually do. But the real challenge is also that I do believe there is such thing as too much data. So it's also the question we always ask ourselves when we're doing something is, what type of actionable decisions can we actually make from this? Because we can actually tell a user, tell our management team anything they want to know. But the real question is it something that they can actually take action against?
Right, right. So I guess talking about kind of disparity. So I think you have kind of a unique advantage in, with the local nows, you've got really all that data, but you're also distributing it to other platforms that, to your points earlier, are not giving you as much fidelity. What do you think is maybe the single largest data point that is missing as a standard? There is no standard, but if there were a standard, what's your top choice for a data point that you would want to see from all of your partners? That you think everyone should be entitled to?
Well, I mean, the most important thing is always revenue. But I said, secondly, after revenue, is I actually think it's sessions, or what the universe refers to as MAUs. I think a lot of people put out and they speak to MAUs, but there is not a standard definition of actually what an MAU is. I've talked to multiple different platforms and groups and organizations, and it seems like everyone has a different definition. And that's one of the things that I felt that organizations such as the IAB and OPA, when web and video and mobile was really launching, they helped to really standardize that across the board, and really how do we define that? Because I don't know if people remember, there was a point where Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, was actually used to count, I think if people just had the app actually on the device and they were counting those actually as unique, and they came in and standardized that, which actually cut their numbers down in half. But everyone's going to try to game the system, but having those set standards and some type of association overseeing it, I think is really key for everyone. I mean, all linear is moving into the streaming world at a rapid rate. We're seeing that with sports and with just how many different, basically every network at this point is on streaming. And I think with dollars and with the business moving there, we really have to have some true level of standardization, normalization, and or else it's just too much of a wild west. And it doesn't just hurt the individual companies, but it hurts the marketers, it hurts the agencies. And I think it's going to be really important as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. So, top on your wish list, and obviously for the benefit of our audience, the MAUs, getting the MAUs is obviously kind of the first thing. And that's not a globally available metric right now. And, access to that could be as easy as asking for it, but it also could be as difficult as making it a contractual obligation to your distributors, right? So there's a couple different levels there to really solve that gap. And then once you have it, you have the added complexity of understanding and normalizing the MAUs across your distribution, because to your point, they're calculated differently. So you can't just throw them together and expect that result is accurate, right?
Exactly. That is really that, to be honest, is the biggest challenge. Sometimes getting our hands on the data takes a lot of time, but then we really spend a lot of time just trying to normalize it. How are they defining it? So when we're because we can't go into a meeting with senior management and showing MAUs and they're defined 4 or 5 different ways. At that point, they just want to run you out the room. So you really have to have a normalized standard way of across the board to really group it together and present a true cohesive picture.
Absolutely. So, you kind of hit on normalization again and the challenges therein. So again, you're on the Riveting platform today. I guess what business benefits, speed of results, just, accuracy, can you kind of help the audience understand how automation and technology can help solve some of the problems we've been talking about?
Yeah, definitely. So we initially launched with one of our boutique brands, actually, Pattern with Riveting. And as we had been expanding to across various different platforms. And the issue we were really challenged with was we were working with medium, small, large size, different platforms. But one was the collection of the data, and two, the normalization of the data. And to be honest, of the different companies we met, most of them felt they had various different ways that they could go and collect the data. But you guys actually had the experience of, especially for the partners that we had launched with, where you had actually gone through the effort of actually normalizing it, so sharing with, okay, this is the dictionary, this is how it's different, this is how we've come up with a formula to actually combine and present that in a cohesive way. And that was actually probably one of the key things for us, because right, just having the data all in one place, but if you can't tell a true story and answer questions, because once you share the data, it's always going to be followed by a multitude of different questions about what it means for the business. And if it's not really organized or normalized, that makes that almost challenging, if not almost impossible. And that was one of the real key things that you guys solved for us. Plus, being able to go and collect also saved us a lot of time, where we had members basically spending hours, over 10, 15 hours a month, just collecting and trying to cobble the data together, which is time they're now able to spend and instead really focus on the insights, the learnings, and what it really means to the business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So really up-leveling from managing the data to acting on the data, right? Which is where we would all ideally want to be at the end of the day. And also I'm interested in, I've been in media for a while. I come from, to your point around, the Nielsen book will come out, there's analysis, there's conversation, there's strategy built on that. But it's kind of almost transactional. And now we're in a cadence where it could be near real time. With that new data availability, how part and parcel is that now to senior managements? Do they want to see it daily, weekly? I mean, how often and how are they accessing and how are they asking those questions now that there is more data available?
No, I think we do provide daily dashboard, kind of weekly summations, as well as monthly, because there's different views and different pictures. During severe weather, we actually provide updates every few hours. So, or even in some cases, hourly or in a half hour, based on, we just put out a new ANF feed in the 4th position. How's that performing? Well, okay, let's move it to another position and be able to do that in 30 minutes and see if you see a spike in engagement. I mean, that's the type of insight that's truly real time, that's reacting to what the consumer is doing. So as opposed to spending time guessing and assuming what the consumer really wants or what they're using or what's of importance to them, they're able to see that in real time. And I mean, it really becomes a space where it's really your imagination is your only limitation. And I think
Absolutely.
That's where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so I do know, obviously my company, we work with, Local Now and really all of the distributors. And Local Now, it does give a great prevalence of data to help inform their partners, their content owners, to help basically as a partner understand what's working, how to do more of that, what's not working, why is it not working. But, not all platforms are doing that. So, when you're, the results and the KPIs you just kind of listed off, there's gaps in that data, and I know there's means of extrapolation, but from a business perspective, absent that data, would you envision kind of extrapolation to plug those goals or those holes to make those decisions, or how do you as a company kind of deal with any gaps there across, non-local now distributors?
It's something that we deal with on a daily basis and challenge, especially as we continue to expand. We have a very synchronized team. So when we're doing new development, whether it's internal or external, we tend to have scrum meetings where we'll discuss what is the plan from the ad sales perspective, what's the plan from analytics perspective. So analytics is actually a very key part of every conversation. And that comes from the top down, from our owner, Byron Allen, to Michael Senzon, the leader on our digital side, is they're very focused on data and the insights and driving the business. So when it comes to any type of releases or new expansions, one of the key questions is always not just how the product's going to look, but what is the level of the insights we're going to have. And, that's one of the things we really kind of cherish and we like about what we do here is that data and insights is kind of always top of mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so completely agree with that. And as I said earlier, I've been pretty vocal around data transparency. Again, Local Now kind of is one of the leaders of the pack just in terms of partnership with their content owners, but not everyone's the same way. Why do you think that is? I mean, from my perspective, holding back data hurts both parties, right? Because if I'm a content owner distributing with a partner, if I don't know what's working, I won't know to do more of it. And if it's not working, I might see the revenue impact from it, but I don't necessarily know why. Why do you think there's an unwillingness by some parties to really share that meaningful partnership data?
I think it really goes to what was the kind of core focus of different companies. Some companies, right, are more focused on the production side, on distributing, being available to everybody everywhere. It's really about what are the tenets of that company is really focused on. For us, data was always one of the key pillars from the very beginning, that they were focused on. And that comes from our history being with the Weather Channel, being the largest app available in the marketplace. So we've always been a database company, even though we're a media company. So I think it's really because of that lens. So it was always designed and built with data. So I've been at places before where data is secondary or not even one of the key focuses. So it's something thought about afterwards. And trying to build in an analytics pipeline into your infrastructure after you've launched it's similar to what they always make the comment of it's always easier to build from the ground up than it is to try to build a new bridge parallel to an existing bridge. It's going to cost you 3 or 4x. So right. It really comes down to that. And if you build it initially, then if they were trying to retrofit it to bring in the data, it's not only going to make it more costly and more challenging, but it's also going to limit the scope of what you're actually able to create without, Sears completely almost reconstructing your product.
Right.
Yeah. Really, I think that's probably more the key drivers is, how was data thought about at the very onset of your build out and your development?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay.
I think people are seeing more of it now where they're really starting to understand it. And, I think people always understood there's power in data, but exactly how they can use it and how they can leverage it, we're starting to really see that grow exponentially now.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I apologize, folks. I should have said at the outset. So we're trying to make time for Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions. I think Jose and the fine folks at OTT.X will kind of aggregate those and ask us. But anything you want to know about, please feel free to go ahead and type it in. So Paul, as we look forward, I think what are you most looking forward to in 2024, 2025 as the industry continues to evolve, both from a data perspective, from a tooling data, partnership data, or just the industry as a whole? What do you think is the bright North Star there?
I think definitely normalization is the key. I think that was going to be huge for adoption and for rapid growth. Two, I think also when people think of data, they think of data design. And I think that's also an area that is been under focused on. Even with us, there are some challenges there, is not just how do you have the data, but how do you take the data to really tell a story? That is actually a kind of a whole separate skill set. And that's probably the other area where I really see there's some huge opportunities. Kind of with that, one of the questions we would have is actually what is kind of on your roadmap for next year with how you guys are planning to kind of continue to build and grow?
Yeah, so I think kind of part and parcel to the conversation we've had to this point. Data is key. Understanding the data, having accurate data, one, understanding it and telling a story. I'm reminded actually when we were first partnering up on Revedia, one of the questions that we asked you and your team regularly is, what answers do you want to see? Which, to your point, shapes. The data has a shape, and shaping that data to make sure that we're answering those questions reliably and accurately is critical. And frankly, the questions you ask are in some ways different than some of our other partners because of your business is different. It's unique, as is theirs. So having that partnership, really understanding what business problems are you trying to solve? What are you trying to understand? And to your point, I've got a team of people that is their skill set. It's turning the data into a story and into a forward forecast that you can make some decisions on. So I've always appreciated the partnership there with the industry. Relative to kind of roadmap and future looking, I'm a firm believer in data. Data informs everything from my personal investments to me operating a business and so on and so forth. And being a continued advocate for data transparency. I'm at many of the trade events screaming at that loudly. I'm usually supported by many of your peers, and Allen Media is one of them, to really kind of affect change there and bring more data and make it more available, because it helps all parties, right? What's that saying? Rising tide lifts all boats. That's a real thing. But in addition to that, bringing in incremental data that's complementary, right? So we've talked about Nielsen, taking that to a next level, getting to like social economic data for like Scarborough data, bringing in ad data, bringing in real-time weather data, which affects viewership. I mean, all of these things, social media, understanding consumer and viewer sentiment over a given piece of content, or its scheduled time in the case of fast or linear, et cetera. So I'm really looking forward to kind of cracking that open and bringing in a lot of complementary data. So you still know what you're doing, but now it's really understanding the why, which the data might not tell you today, because it's dependent upon all of these other data points. Again, a hurricane traveling up the East Coast, that affects viewership. How can or should that affect programming? Maybe, well, in the case of the Weather Channel, of course, dramatically it affects programming, but for other folks, should it, right? And so really just helping expose our customers and our partners to more data to understand what and why. So those are probably the biggest on my roadmap. And obviously that takes a huge AI investments because those types of, those data sets are complex to begin with, just on their own. Merging them into the single story and the overall narrative, that's taking some time, but absolutely our biggest focus moving forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned one in particular that I think is an area that a lot of people, I think there's a lot of different data sets for social and then for actually what's happening with the FAST platform, but there has not been a lot of where you're actually merging those two insights, because a lot of what's happening in social can help answer the why. And I think that's an area of opportunity to really, how do we take the platform usage data and tie it with the social data to really start to answer the question of why are we seeing some of the insights and shifts that we're seeing in the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think as I'll use the word chaotic. As chaotic as digital is, what I watch, my viewer pattern yesterday is wholly different than what it's going to be today, which is wholly different than what it's going to be this weekend. And having a tool or tools available that will understand and be able to better predict some of that viewing habits creates opportunities for the media companies to then say, if I do this instead of that, I'm going to make things up now. If Big Bang Theory on a fast channel should be at 2 p.m. instead of 5 p.m., how is that likely to affect the audience that's watching at that point in time? And ultimately, the monetization of that viewer, right? If it's ad supported, et cetera. So those are some of the big value propositions that we're working towards to help the overall industry.
Perfect.
Okay. I guess, Jose, I don't know that I can see questions. So I don't know if any have come through, or am I just not looking in the right place?
No worries. Thank you guys so much for a great conversation. And yes, to our attendees, please, if you have questions, filter them in. Thank you guys so much. That was very interesting. And we know, our evolving OTT landscape is providing a tremendous amount of data these days. And those that digest the correct and pertinent data, turn it into a story for decision makers and leverage it for decisions will be in a leader or first mover position in the industry. And it's awesome to see how the Allen Media Group is already kind of going in that direction with the help of Rividia. Thank you guys so much. I do have a couple follow-ups just from my end. Paul, I'm interested in knowing what data from the platforms on your teams find the most helpful in helping determine content investment and production and distribution strategies. What are the key indicators that you're looking for?
Really, MAUs and MAUs per user, I think, are probably the key ones, because a lot of our content is about being part of the daily habit. That's kind of always the ultimate goal. To really understand, right, all users have a limited amount of media consumption time. So one of the indicators we use for determining whether we're meeting their mission and their goal and satisfying their mission is if we're seeing repeat usage, right? Where they're actually allocating to us a certain part of their limited media consumption time to our brand. So those are probably one of the key indicators that we really focus on is sessions per users.
Gotcha. And Mark and Paul, from your experience, have you worked with platforms that provide a better set of data? I know you talked about having to normalize it, which is obviously a process a lot, but are there some that kind of provide the data that's perfect, ready to go for you guys?
Well, I mean, perfect is a relative term, but I will say, Local Now is probably one of the most transparent in the industry right now. Just their willingness to share the what, and to the extent to try to answer the why, because there's an understanding there that if the content coming to me is better, my consumption is going to be better, monetization is going to be better, so on and so forth. And I think to Paul's points earlier, while Local Now's kind of leading the pack, there's also maturity issues there too. Some of the smaller distribution platforms, they don't themselves necessarily have the tools to provide that data in a timely or more accurate way. So we're trying to work to kind of solve for that at the same time. So yeah, it's across the board. There is no perfect, there is no standard. I will say, just for what it's worth for the attendees, so we do have kind of a standard schema that we basically evolve everything into, that everything springboards off of. I have no desire to own that standard. I'm happy to publish that standard because I think it benefits the overall industry. If we can get to that point, I think everyone wins. And I'm happy to help support both content owner and platform along the way to get to that consistent data set such that business decisions can be made accordingly.
Gotcha. And Mark, to that point, how do you see that distribution platforms benefiting from providing more data to content companies?
Kind of going back to that rising tide thing, effectively a lot of these distributors, I mean, not to distill them oversimplification, they're resellers, right? I'm taking this thing and I'm reselling it to another audience, and understanding what that audience is resonating with should be informed back to the content owner, because I want more of that, right? If I want more, if I share on the Venn diagram 80% kind of overlap, 90% overlap with Big Bang Theory, Parks and Recs, or pick any of your contents, that type of audience that I have is going to continue to resonate, consume, watch, and I can monetize that. So to me, that's really the biggest benefit. I'm reselling a product. I want a better product. The people making that product need the data in order to do so.
Absolutely.
And I'll also add to that also adoption. I think the better quality or information of the data that you have and you're able to provide, that drives adoption. I mean, we still live in a very small universe in this media space. So everyone talks. So who has great information that you can actually make actual insights off of and who doesn't. And the ones that provide you better insights and information tends to be where most of the content partners and distributors are going to lean towards.
Yep.
Gotcha. Paul, question from one of our attendees here today. Are you seeing engagement growing in AVOD compared to fast linear channels? And how are the analytics challenges different from AVOD, if at all?
So we're an AVOD platform over at Local now. And so, like we said, between AVOD and fast, it varies. I think it's really based on the individual company. There are some larger than us, some smaller that have maybe similar levels of insights and data they provide. But I think it really based on the platform as far as the data and the insights that's available. I don't think it's really a difference between fast and AVOD. AVOD platform potentially just maybe a little bit more mature because probably they've been stood up and around a little longer.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add to that just from an engagement perspective. So I kind of see, obviously fast is growing, and well, pardon the pun, fast is growing fast. And I see that as a great natural way to expose consumers and viewers to new content, right? It's kind of a lean back approach. What's on is on. And in doing so, you're exposed to new content that you might not have seen before. So what I'm seeing more and more of is fast is a means for content exposure. From which AVOD can then extend from, right? If a brand new program I've never even heard of, didn't even know to search for it, I caught part of it on because it was on a fast channel or even linear. That then creates an opportunity for me as a viewer to go find it on AVOD, generally with that same platform or that same content owner's platform, etc. So yeah, I do actually see there is a correlation between fast exposure and an incremental engagement on associated AVOD assets.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Mark, Paul mentioned, he talked earlier about the rapid rise of fast. Do you believe that Riveting is scalable for companies who, let's say, focus primarily on fast?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've got fast modules, AVOD modules, and we're not just an enterprise solution, right? We work with some of the smallest content owners, some of the smallest platforms out there with thousands of viewers, not tens or hundreds of thousands, all the way up to some of the biggest brands in media and entertainment. So yeah, Riveting will scale all the way up and all the way down.
Oh, great. That's great to hear. And Mark and Paul, finally, how do you see data transparency and data standardization? How can it help the industry overall? I know that we were overarching that, but what would be the main benefits of it?
I think in this space, data transparency doesn't necessarily exist right now as it does in the other digital spaces. I think that just has to do with where it is in its evolution process, and also, especially as the linear players are starting to get into the space, a lot of them traditionally didn't share their information. They don't in the linear space. So it's a completely different way of doing business to be actually more open and transparent with their business, with their data. So I think that's going to come with time, but it's a complete cultural change.
Yep, agree with that. And I will say, I apologize for Jose for making you do all this. I just found the Q&A button, so now I can actually see some of the questions myself. So one question that I did want to hit on, because I think it's important for a good percentage of our audience, which is, how do you structure the business model if you're a content owner, right? When you're engaging a network, is it 50-50 revenue split, those types of things. I think the answer there is kind of wholly dependent upon the content you have, the propensity for engagement and consumption of that content, and using models to understand how best to maximize that revenue. In some cases, a flat license fee is still very prevalent in the market today. A distributor could say, I will just pay you X for 1 year's rights to have this asset, this content, this program on my platform. I am seeing from our various companies and partners that there is a growing propensity for like minimum thresholds with then either ad share revenue on top of that, or inventory splits, right? So instead of ad revenue share, which is they monetize how best they can, and then they share, 20, 30, 50, 60%, pick a percentage there, and then that's back up to the content owner. There are many cases where an inventory split makes the most sense, such that the content owner or the source could say, of this 2-minute, 3-minute ad block in the case of FAST, we're going to keep the first 60 seconds. I've got an in-house ad sales team who's going to go in and fill those and then give it off to the networks or the distributor for the remaining 60 or 120 seconds. So in many cases, really mirroring, things come full circle, right? In many cases, that mirrors the traditional linear where the broadcaster will own certain segments of the pod and then hand it off to, or network would own a certain segment of the pod and then hand it off to their affiliates or hand it off to the cable company or whomever to fill the rest. So there's a whole different models. There a whole various set of different models. There's no right answer that is universal, but there are absolutely right answers to optimize revenue.
Yeah, and I think, Jose, that also goes to whoever is constructing these deals of asking the right questions, right? For one, it's about your infrastructure. Do you have an infrastructure for ad serving? Two, it's also looking at what models work for those particular partners. Like on our side, we have a lot of inventory split partners that are now coming to us to do and converting to rev share. Main reason is we're actually, with our ad tech stack, better actually ad serving and targeting than potentially they are. So it's actually in their best benefit. So I think, right, it's about not just thinking about it from a very flat standpoint, but kind of really thinking about the more larger picture, especially regarding your infrastructure and how you're really set up to really capitalize on the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much. Mark, Paul, this was a great discussion. There's a lot of work to be done on your end, but we're great to see some progress. As always, this session was recorded and will be available for viewing on demand and on the OTT.X website over the next couple of days. We have a lot of exciting events in the coming weeks, beginning with tomorrow's OTT.X New York Salon taking place in Soho. Network with key industry executives and like-minded individuals amongst topical conversation and some beverages. For our West Coast folks, we will be holding an LA meetup on October 18th in Burbank for our members to gather and those that are interested to learn more about the OTT.X community and its amazing members. On October 11th, we will return with the OTT.X Buzz session. That one will be moderated by David Bloom, senior contributor for Forbes, and feature Tony Weedar, Chief Operating Officer for Cineverse, Laura Martin, Managing Director, Senior Internet and Media Analyst for Needham and Company, Josh Pine, Chief Revenue Officer for XL8, Sal Scamardo, VP of Distribution and Marketing for FilmRise, and Jonathan Skogmo, Co-Chairman, Online Video Committee for the Producers Guild of America. That's going to do it for us here today. Mark, Paul, thank you once again for a great presentation. Looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.